The two sisters could hardly believe their eyes. The massive boulder had actually crushed the great white shark to death, but their relief quickly turned into panic. There were still several fierce great whites lurking in the water. They could launch an attack at any moment. And now, there were no more loose boulders left on the mountain, stranded on a tiny island barely 10 square meters wide. The two girls remained trapped on their wooden raft, with danger closing in from all sides. How would they ever make it out alive? Just a few hours earlier, Sarah had set off with a group of friends, flying a seaplane toward a remote island for a fun getaway. But just as they were nearing their destination, the plane suddenly malfunctioned. The moment it made contact with the ocean, it broke apart and sank rapidly beneath the surface. Sarah was the first to emerge from the water. Frantically, she looked around, hoping to spot her friends, but instead, she was horrified to see a massive shark slowly gliding past her right in front of her eyes. Thankfully, the shark showed no signs of aggression. After a few tense moments, it vanished beneath the waves. Sarah finally breathed a sigh of relief when she saw her best friend appear nearby. Then Sarah's boyfriend, Sam, also surfaced. They had both miraculously survived the crash, but the fate of the others remained unknown. Suddenly, Sam spotted something in the distance. He swam over to take a closer look. It was the injured pilot, barely clinging to life. The pilot had lost consciousness due to severe injuries. Thankfully, Sarah's friend had found a life raft. Seeing this, Sarah quickly rushed over to help, but none of them noticed what was happening behind them. In an instant, the shark dragged the pilot underwater. By the time the two women inflated the raft and climbed aboard, they realized the pilot had vanished without a trace. Just then, Sam spotted a small island in the distance. It was the very island they had planned to visit. Before takeoff, the pilot had mentioned that the island had supplies, so Sam decided to swim there alone to send out a distress signal. Sarah immediately jumped into the water to stop him. She warned him there were sharks in the area, but Sam didn't believe her. He thought it was just panic talking. Unexpectedly, as they were speaking, 3 massive sharks suddenly appeared on the surface, and they were all swimming straight toward them. The two of them were instantly thrown into the water. Her best friend quickly handed Sarah a dagger, hoping it could help fend off another shark attack. But in the very next second, her friend was dragged underwater by a shark. Once again, Sarah narrowly escaped with her life, but the sharks beneath the surface were still circling, eyes locked on her. She knew that if she stayed there, death was inevitable. Without hesitation, she began paddling the life raft away from the scene. Her only hope now was to reach the small island in the distance. At that moment, Sarah spotted a figure floating on the surface of the water. It turned out to be another one of her companions, but no matter how loudly she shouted, there was no response. When she finally pulled the body closer, she was horrified to discover that the lower half had already been devoured by a shark. Just then, the vicious shark appeared again. Seeing this, Sarah had no choice but to abandon the raft and flee for her life. Luckily, the island was now within reach. She took a deep breath and leapt into the water, then began swimming with all her strength toward the raft. Sarah once again escaped death by a hair's breadth. She quickly opened the supply box on the raft. To her relief, it actually contained some food and water. Even more surprising was the discovery of a walkie-talkie. Unfortunately, no one responded to her desperate calls for help. Then Sarah found a flare gun. Without hesitation, she loaded a flare into the chamber and fired it high into the sky, praying that a passing ship might see the signal. Just as she was anxiously waiting for rescue, Sarah suddenly spotted the last surviving companion, Julie. Miraculously, Julie hadn't been attacked by the sharks. She had only injured her leg during the crash, but just as Sarah was about to pull Julie onto the raft, the vicious shark suddenly reappeared.
What?
Fortunately, it was another narrow escape. The shark failed to land an attack and vanished back into the water. When Julie learned that the others had all been taken by the sharks, she was overwhelmed with grief. After that, Sarah carefully bandaged her wound. Just then, a sudden voice came through the radio. Someone had heard Sarah's distress call. They were on their way in a speedboat. Upon learning there were sharks in the water, they immediately stopped at a safe distance. Weapons in hand, they began to stay alert. As expected, the worst soon happened. A shark suddenly rammed the boat with great force. One man lost his balance and fell straight into the sea. Another man reached out to rescue him, but the shark burst from the water and tore off his arm in an instant. In the end, both men were devoured by the shark. Their bodies were consumed in mere seconds, helplessly watching their last hope of rescue vanish. Sarah and Julie were instantly consumed by despair. The shark, however, was still circling nearby, waiting patiently for another chance to strike. At that moment, both women finally realized they could no longer sit and wait for death. They had to find a way to kill the shark. Julie looked up and immediately came up with a plan to end the nightmare. There was a massive boulder teetering on the cliff above. They tied a rope securely around the giant rock. Then they slapped the water, trying to lure the shark in, hoping to use the giant boulder to crush it. But no matter how hard Sarah slapped the water, the clever shark refused to take the bait. With no other choice, Sarah decided to act as bait herself. She jumped straight into the water to attract the shark. Before long, 3 sharks swam over as expected.
Get up here!
But the other 2 sharks kept circling around nearby. There were no extra boulders left on the cliff. Just when the 2 didn't know what to do, they suddenly spotted a spear gun drifting toward them. To grab the spear gun, Sarah quickly found 2 stones. Then she soaked them in blood from her wound and threw them into the sea. Once the sharks were successfully attracted, she prepared to seize the chance to retrieve the spear gun. Sarah jumped into the water. Just as Sarah grabbed the spear gun, one of the sharks suddenly turned and swam straight toward her. Julie, still on the raft, was frantic with worry, urging Sarah to hurry back. In desperation, Julie grabbed a knife and jumped into the water. After a fierce struggle, Julie's thigh was firmly bitten by the shark. In the chaos, her knife stabbed the shark's eye, allowing them to narrowly escape from its jaws. Supporting each other, the 2 quickly climbed back onto the raft, but Julie's thigh wound was too severe. In the end, she lost consciousness due to excessive blood loss. The loss of her last companion filled Sarah with uncontrollable anger. She was determined to fight the sharks to the very end. Sarah took out gasoline from the supply box, then tied one end of a rope to the supply box and the other end to the spear gun. She sat back on the raft, holding up the spear gun, kicking her legs continuously against the water to attract the sharks' attention. Soon enough, the sharks were drawn in. The roaring flames instantly engulfed the sharks. After struggling for a moment, they went completely still. But just as Sarah was basking in the joy of victory, the last shark suddenly burst out of the water, snatching Julie's body in one powerful bite. Sarah realized this was the perfect chance to escape. Seizing the moment, she jumped into the water, swimming toward the nearby speedboat. But before Sarah could climb aboard, the shark chased after her relentlessly. In a life-or-death moment, Sarah once again narrowly escaped death. The shark, having missed its prey, began ramming the speedboat, trying to knock Sarah into the water the same way. Sarah started the boat, ready to leave, only to find the engine wouldn't start no matter what she tried. Then she suddenly spotted the oxygen tank inside the cabin, and immediately thought of a clever plan. Meanwhile, the shark kept pounding against the boat relentlessly. Sarah taped a dagger to the bottom of the oxygen tank, held a wrench tightly in her right hand, and crouched inside the cabin, waiting for the shark's next attack. And just like that, Sarah successfully took down the last shark, surviving against all odds. She was overjoyed. She couldn't believe she had really made it. Even more fortunate, a rescue boat arrived at that very moment. She finally escaped this terrifying nightmare.